Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Hugo Salgado. Professor Salgado has a bachelor's in economics and a master's degree in research economics from Chile, and a PhD in research economics from the University of California at Berkeley. He has been working in fisheries, and specifically with property rights and its use in fisheries. And lately, he is affiliated with the Chilean Interdisciplinary Center for Aquaculture Research, INCAR. He employs empirical studies to evaluate and assess the performance of fisheries and aquaculture. And today, he will be giving the talk, Assessing Socioeconomic Sustainability of Aquaculture in Coastal Communities in Chile. Please welcome Dr. Hugo Salgado.
Thank you, Renato, for your introduction. It's a big pleasure to be back here. I think this is really a wonderful place to study fisheries management. I think this is the best place in the world to study fisheries management and aquaculture, and it's always great to be here, to be back here, and listen and see many, many friend faces. Well, it's also very interesting to me talk about aquaculture in Chile here, because my first experience with aquaculture in Chile comes actually from here. In year 2010, I was visiting here, and Chris Costello was conducting a group project about salmon aquaculture, and so they invited me to join this project as an external advisor. So that was actually my first experience with salmon industry in Chile. And you see there are many faces that you probably have seen around here. And so I served as an external advisor. I helped them when they visited Chile. And I started realizing how important was the aquaculture for our sustainable development in Chile. So it all started here. What I want to talk now is the importance of aquaculture in Chile, salmon aquaculture, but also small-scale aquaculture. I want to talk to you about this new research center that we developed in 2012, the Interdisciplinary Center of Aquaculture Research, and see how we can explore opportunities for collaborate for you and for us. And I also will show some research projects and results where we assess the socioeconomic side of the aquaculture industry. So I will be presenting some study that we did with some researchers that I actually met here from Norway. So it's kind of familiar to you and to me what I will be doing here. So first, let me show you how important is aquaculture for Chile. This is the share in exports of the fisheries and aquaculture sector coming from salmon and from mussels aquaculture. So together, they add up to 75% of the exports of the Chilean sector. And all the other small and wild fisheries exports accounts only for 25%, okay? So it's really, really important for our economic activity and the export sector. And actually, the salmon aquaculture and the fisheries sector is the third most important economic sector in Chile. The first one is mining, the second one is forestry, and the third one is fisheries and aquaculture. So sustainable aquaculture and sustainable exploitation of our natural resources is crucial for us. If we cannot create a sustainable industry here, the future of Chilean export will be really in danger. So let me talk to you a little bit about this salmon aquaculture in Chile. I took this from the final report of the group study, so thank you. So basically, what this group was doing was analyzing this salmon aquaculture industry, which is one of the, as I said before, most important industry in Chile. And the thing here is that the industry found a really interesting opportunity to build an activity, an economic activity in Los Lagos region, and they become the second largest salmon producer in the world after Norway, okay? And all of that was exactly here in a very, very small location. So Norway had a huge cost with salmon everywhere. We were following them having about the same that they were producing, but just here in a really, really small spot. So that clearly created problems that I will mention later, a lot of sustainability problems. And the industry started expanded from Los Lagos, from this to Aysén, and now to Magallanes. But here we have a huge opportunity to conduct a sustainable aquaculture because they stopped the industry to grow here, and they created huge local rules to develop in aquaculture. And they want to build sustainable salmon aquaculture in the Magallanes region. They say in a different way, in a new way. They say salmon 2.0 industry, okay? And basically, in the first stage, the development of the aquaculture was really unsustainable, okay? The growth of the industry did not have any institutional development. The people say the fisheries law is for fishing, not for aquaculture. So the industry grew basically without a law that can support their development. So they were very weak and basically no enforcement. So, you can see here that all Chilean people live in the center. And basically, the Chilean Patagonia is unpopulated. So they were putting industry there where there is no people. So nobody goes there to enforce what they are doing. Okay, it can take 2 or 3 days to get to a facility in some cases. We were visiting Aysén with Professor Hunter Lenihan here in Coyhaique. And then we went to another place where they have aquaculture in Puyuhuapi. He loves that word. And Aysén is here, and Puyuhuapi is here. And it took us like 5 hours to get there. It's just crazy. But the best road they have there. So it's really, really impossible to do good enforcement there. And so the hope for the sustainable aquaculture now is here in Magallanes. And we are working on trying to understand what they can do to develop a new kind of style of industry. So the main sustainability problems that we were facing there, basically no spatial design, no knowledge of environmental condition and how much the environment can support, okay? No sanitary control, no regulations on the use of chemicals and antibiotics. They can use whatever they want. Before, this is first stage, okay? What happened before the big ISA virus crisis. A huge environmental effects of waste, escapes, and pollution on marine environment, and negative impacts on local community, competing use of the ocean, and effects on fishermen, local fishermen, and tourism. So we went to the international big news, New York Times, after the ISA virus wrote an article, 2011, saying that basically the Chilean salmon industry is unsustainable, okay? And this grade, they say it's all Norway's fault, okay? Because the Norwegian went there with their salmon industry trying to expand that, and they took the virus to Chile. So a lot of news in the States and everywhere saying that finally the Norwegians were it was Norwegians' fault what happened in Chile with the ISA virus. So we had this 2007 ISA virus that is in all the places where there is salmon aquaculture, but just we were not prepared to deal with it, okay? Everybody knew about that in other places, but in Chile, they didn't. So this virus basically struck the industry. The big marine harvest closed 16 of their 60 centers. Almost all the centers, they fired 1,200 workers. More than 700-800 workers were fired in all the industry, so it was a huge mess in the terms of socioeconomics, okay? Particularly with workers. Exports were reduced by 15%, okay? And there were important economics costs. So after that huge impact, basically the industry and the government and the NGOs got together and said, we need to develop new rules. I mean, it's not possible, it's not sustainable. Salmon aquaculture is important for us, and we are not doing it in a good way. So they started developing a roundtable. They work together, they look at what they can be done, and they started with new rules and new regulations. So, for example, the expansion of aquaculture was stopped in Puerto Montt, in Punta Arenas, in Aysén. so that they can set the rules first and then say how they can grow again. And this is actually something that the industry realized too. So the industry understand that they have been doing with no good practices so far, and that they knew a new 2.0 aquaculture. So what are the new areas of regulation? They close, the new concessions, and they open very slowly. Actually, in Puerto Montt and in Aysén, it's closed still, and they are only given just a small number of concessions in Magallanes. They regulate the zones, the areas where the fishing system are. They create what we call neighborhoods. So if there is some virus in a location, they close the whole neighborhood. They limit the growth, the production and growth of capacity. And there is, if they do something against the laws, they can lose the license, and that's a huge, huge impact. So basically, what we are doing is creating a new set of rules to try to build this new sustainable industry. But the thing is that salmon, even when it is the most important aquaculture activity, is not the only aquaculture activity. As Ben Harper knows, right, because he participates in a center in Chile, mussels are also a big source of aquaculture in Chile. So this is the aquaculture harvest in Chile, 2013, and around 74% of aquaculture is actually fish, okay, and about 25% is mussel, okay. Which is also another activity that happened in the Chilean Patagonia. But other than that, there is also algae. There is also other activities being developed in Chile for aquaculture. So it's not only salmon. Salmon is really important, but it's not the only activity that we do with aquaculture. So this is Chile from north to south. So this is super easy to read. This is here is Peru over there, and here is the Antarctica. So salmon basically is distributed in the Patagonia, of course. Then this is Puerto Montt area. This is Aysén area around Puyuhuapi. So now they produce about the same, okay? And this is the growth in Magallanes region. So the big area with only just a limited amount of fish, and the hope for the development of sustainable aquaculture. But we also have mussels here in the 10th region, mostly. And you can see there is a small lines here where you see that there is also aquaculture in other places, but it's just really, really small, okay? And there is also an opportunity there to develop aquaculture all over the country. So what is in there? So mollusk, we have, again, mussels mostly in the south. This is what is exploited here. And here in the 3rd and 4th region in the north of Chile, they produce scallop and abalone, okay? In very, very small scale. So basically artisanal fishermen. And then the algae, we have what we call pelillo, or gracilaria, and guiro, macrocystis, that is also harvested here in the north, but also in the south. So there is a lot more in aquaculture than only salmon. The thing is that these are only 5 species, and Chile fishes many, 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 many others, okay? But they have not been developed in aquaculture. So there is a huge opportunity here to find new opportunities to develop new species in aquaculture all over the coast in Chile. So there is a huge concentration of aquacultures, as everything in Chile. People is concentrated, wealth is concentrated, aquaculture is concentrated in space and species, okay? Concentrated in the south and concentrated in salmonids and mussels, basically. And abalone and pelillo and guiro, they are mostly small-scale facilities. They are not very dense. And there is the need in Chile for developing other opportunities over species, and there is plenty of room for developing a small-scale aquaculture. One of them is something we are interested on a study, and which is developing a small-scale aquaculture in turfs. okay? I will talk about that a little bit. But this requires to deal not only with ecological knowledge about how the species grow, but also with social, with economic, and institutional issues. It's really hard to get a license to do aquaculture, okay? But when you have a turf, then you can do it. So there is an opportunity there in terms of institutional issues. We'll talk about that later. So Chile obviously realizes, the country realizes that we need to develop sustainable aquaculture. Otherwise, the future will be compromised. So the Chilean government declared sustainable aquaculture as one of the key strategic areas for sustainable development and for economic development in Chile. And they made a call for the big research fund of priority areas of the National Research Agency that created centers to study important things for Chile. And there are like 5 centers doing this, doing different things. So one is mining, different things. And they wanted to create a center in sustainable aquaculture. So I was in Concepcion at that time. I am in Talca now, but I was in Concepcion at that time. And we worked together with a group of people from different areas and proposed a multidisciplinary center for sustainable aquaculture research. So we created INCAR, okay? So INCAR, basically what INCAR wants to do is to generate relevant high-level scientific knowledge to turn in aquaculture into an ecological, economic, and social sustainable productive activity, okay? And why? Because we want to contribute to Chilean sustainable development. So we want to become our globally recognized center for sustainable aquaculture in the Southeast Pacific. We want to be the center that do what's important to create a sustainable aquaculture, to understand the problem and to find solutions. Pretty much what Bren does, okay? But focus on sustainable aquaculture in Chile. So this is INCAR, basically, the different areas. We are organized in 5 areas: environmental sustainability, animal health, aquaculture genomics, something I don't know anything about, marine genomics, and socioeconomic sustainability. So I work in this research area. There are about 6 professors from economics and also from sociology who works there, and we are trying to understand the socioeconomic issues that are required to achieve sustainable development of aquaculture in Chile. Let me show you just a little bit about what we are doing. This is, I know you cannot read it. I'm not intending you to read it, but just you can see we do a lot of things, okay? So basically, the first area, the aquaculture genomics, are trying to develop and understand the genetics of not only salmon, but also other species, so that they can work on developing new medicines or new species that can be adapted to the environment that we have there. An interesting thing is that they want to understand the effects of environmental conditions, okay, on populations, okay, through the genetics analysis. The second one analyzes the genomics but the native resources. So they want to understand what happened with the native resources, how they are affected by different activities, and how can we develop new aquaculture opportunities for native species. Not only introduce species like salmon, but also try to put some wild fish that is in problem, try to understand if we can develop methods to do aquaculture of those fishes. And this is also an opportunity to rebuild fish stocks, natural fish stocks. So there is a lot of people here working in this area, and they have already very interesting results with some species. The third program, they are more in the south, and they try to analyze animal health, which is a big problem with salmon. Today we have 3 huge kind of viruses and diseases that are killing the industry, basically, and it's a huge problem. So they are trying to understand how can build new methods to try to avoid those problems. So vaccination, immunological analysis, and they are trying to build these new methods they are actually building new methods for sanitary purposes or in salmon, and some of the methods they have developed are now used around the world, okay? We have the environmental sustainability. So all of this, first, the one, the second, and the third area are basically focused inside the cages or inside the aquaculture side. But in the fourth and fifth program, we try to see above that. So the fourth one, basically what they try to do is to understand what are the environmental effects of any kind of aquaculture activity. So the effects on the ecology of the ecosystem. And they develop, for example, epidemiological models for salmon, for caligus, and for SRS. And they explore plasticity of species. They are building conceptual and quantitative models. They are developing interdisciplinary conceptual models of sustainability. Most of them focus on environmental sustainability, okay? And finally, we have the fifth area in which I work. And what we are doing, basically trying to understand the regulation of the industry and how can create correct incentives such that the people who do aquaculture can do it in a sustainable way. And we try to understand the path of development of aquaculture in Chile and why some of the problems that we are actually facing in salmon aquaculture that they are not facing in Norway is because the way in which we have developed this industry, okay? If you look at the details of the history of the industry, you will understand that it's completely different. In Norway, they have been developing salmon aquaculture basically from the community, and in Chile, we have been developing aquaculture from the industry, from outside the industry, to go to a place and try to, quickly grow some species and make money. And finally, we are trying to understand what are the effects of aquaculture on living standards of the coastal community, so more in the socioeconomic side. So the three key socioeconomic questions we are asking is, what are the economic incentives that are required for sustainable development? How does the development of the aquaculture industry compare to other countries? And what is the impact of the aquaculture sector has had on the quality of life of social coastal community? So one of the purposes of the INCAR Center is also to develop international cooperation. So you can see here that the Bren School of Environmental Science and Management is one of the partners that support the development of this INCAR Center. And there are other centers in Spain, in Belgium, in France, and also the NTNU in Norway, which is some people that, as I said before, I met here. And we developed some projects. And also, we have new opportunities for INCAR and the Bren School, because we just signed or are in the process of signing an agreement, a cooperation agreement between INCAR and the Bren School. And you see here, somebody is nodding the eighth of Chileans by one head. And he was, Professor Hunter Lenihan was visiting us and trying to develop, new opportunities. And we think there is a huge opportunity to develop small-scale aquaculture in turfs in Chile. There is a big lab there to try to understand what we can do, how can we do it, and that could be very, very important for Chile, not only for Chile, but also for other countries that want to develop sustainable aquaculture. So if you want to learn more about the INCAR Center, and if you can read Spanish, or you can use Google Translator, which is horrible, but you can still use it. Please go to incar.cl, and you can see there what we are doing, and if there is any opportunity for you to develop any kind of cooperation between the people, with the people there. Okay? So I'm not going to we are fine, right? To my research projects. I have been doing, after the group project, several research projects, some of them doing econometrics with salmon prices, with exports and different things. And some of them have been trying to analyze the interdisciplinary nature of this problem. I just want to mention 3 of them here. One is an index we developed with an undergraduate student, actually, we were interested on study corporate social responsibility of the salmon. The first thing we wanted to do was to compare the corporate social responsibility between Norway and Chile, because there was many industry, many companies from Norway in Chile, and they were behaving in a different way. So how can we compare that? And then we realized there is no measure of corporate social responsibility, so we cannot compare if we cannot measure. So we decided to build an index to measure corporate social responsibility, and with this student, she found a lot of information that can be used, and we write this paper proposing an index for corporate social responsibility. We applied it to some firms, but there is obviously a lot of information problems there, and we are in the process of trying to implement that index for the future. The second project in which I am currently working is a project I was invited to by a postdoc that was here, Rachel Tiller. Some of you know her. And she was applying some Bayesian methods to understand stakeholders' perceptions. So we proposed a project to analyze the same thing in Norway and in Chile, and it was funded by the Norwegian Fund of Research. And this is led by NTNU, the Norwegian Technological University. So I'm going to give you some details about this because I think it's very interesting as a multidisciplinary project, and also the way in which we can understand and contribute to better management. And finally, we are working now also with NTNU in a project funded by the European Commission, trying to understand the future probable impacts of climate change on fisheries, in aquaculture, and tourism, and also from a socioeconomic perspective. What is the capacity that the socioeconomic system had to adapt to the changes that we will experience? And this is also focused on the Chilean Patagonia, so we are just starting this project. We don't have any results yet. But I will share with you some of my results in this part. So basically, what we wanted to do is try to understand and to measure what people think about sustainability of salmon aquaculture in Chile. Okay, so how can we measure perceptions of sustainability? And the motivation for doing this is that basically perception is what people perceive as reality, and that is what we think motivates behavior. So people behave depending on what they think it is sustainable, and not really in what is sustainable, because we don't know. There is a lot of problems with information. There is a lot of myths. There is a lot of, one experience that go over and people say there is nothing good here. The New York Times article that say Chile is unsustainable. So, but how can we really measure sustainability? So what we did was, I can just show you the evolution of this beautiful Patagonia, Torres del Paine. You didn't go. So this is in the Magallanes region. This is the most famous park in Chile. And this is where the salmon aquaculture is now starting, okay, all over the place in the Patagonia. And there is a big industry, so it creates some environmental impact, right, in tourism. But it also creates jobs. It creates opportunities for people that doesn't have any other opportunity to work there. And the industry and the government, sorry for the picture, they work together. They are partners. But they are not actually considering much how other people, other stakeholders are affected by this. So there is tourism. I know Chris wanted to do this, go to fly fishing to the Patagonia. There is artisanal fishermen, low scale, and there is NGOs that try to show everywhere that it's impossible to have sustainable aquaculture in Chile. They say this is an introduced species, it will never be sustainable, so we have to stop salmon aquaculture. They said basically salmon aquaculture is taking our jobs, is taking our people, is affecting negatively. So they even have this, the salmon industry ate Chiloé, which is the Puerto Montt area, and now it's going for Magallanes. And they even have this really ugly picture about salmon. So if you have ever think about not eating salmon, this create a good motivation for not doing it. And as I said before, there is all this issue of people perceive that the industry is not sustainable. But the question is, how can we actually measure it, right? And what we do is basically we went to talk to people and develop a method to try to measure their perceptions of sustainability, okay? So as I said before, basically government and aquaculture company are involved in this industry through regulations, but there is also a number of other people that are affected. The artisanal fishermen are affected, not only because of the environmental impacts, but also because they are hired to work in the aquaculture facilities. So there is when somebody wants to go fishing, now there is nobody to take in the boat because they are all working for the aquaculture industry. The aquaculture workers are affected, obviously, by this industry. The industry that gives services to aquaculture, the NGOs, the community, the tourism sector. So there is a lot more people that is affected by this industry, and we want to understand not only their perception of sustainability, but also these other people's perception. So what we did, we went to talk to people and try to develop a method to measure how they perceive how sustainable is the industry. This is Chile, this is Santiago, the capital, where more than half of the country lives. And so this is the Chilean Patagonia, where the salmon industry develops. Los Lagos region, big salmon industry, Aysén region, new development, and finally the Magallanes region, when there is just a small industry there. So we went to Santiago, talked to people there, talked to the people in the government. We went to Concepcion, talked to the scientists that know about the industry, the INCAR people. We went to Puerto Montt and did several workshops there, and we went to Punta Arenas. So a heavily affected area and a new developed area to see if we can find what they think about the sustainability of the industry. And one way of kind of testing the methods if there is a difference between these two areas, where there is a hope for new sustainable industry here, and there is huge problems of sustainability here, right? So we can compare among them. So what we want to do is try to measure how different stakeholders groups, as a group, perceive sustainability of the industry. What are the most important issues that need to be solved for the development of a sustainable industry, and how can we measure and the perception, and how can we measure if these perceptions are some kind of rational or consistent, or they are just saying anything, right? So are they consistent with what they think? So we try to, and this is the most interesting thing for me, and this is the thing I work the most. Also running the workshops, because they were in Spanish and all the other people were from Norway. So what we did, we developed these stakeholder workshops. We used system thinking to try to create kind of a mental map of the group about how they perceive the aquaculture industry sustainability problems are. We developed here a list of priority issues for the group, and we make them agree on what is the most important issue that need to be solved for the industry to be sustainable. And then we create a network of conditional scenarios, which is called Bayesian Belief Network, where they tell us what needs to be done for this to happen. So what we wanted to do is what needs to be done for the industry to be sustainable, okay? And how we are going to measure the perception of sustainability, we're going to ask them, what is the probability that this happen? What do you think is the probability that this good thing that need to happen to the industry to be sustainable is actually happening? Okay, so they will provide us a measure of how probable they think that the industry is sustainable. And so this is what we call their beliefs, the probability perceptions of the different scenarios. And we finally, this is something new in the literature, because this is not our method, this has been applied in several other areas. But something that people has not done is to check the consistency of the responses. So I went back to my game theory, Bayesian games experience and say, why don't we check the consistency of the stakeholders' belief by using Bayes rule? It's obvious, we can do that. So we did that. So basically, we have a system thinking. I hope you cannot read this. If you can read it, you are super. So we ask them, we give them a number of drivers to start the conversation, and then we let them talk about how this affects the sustainability of the industry. So they start talking, and we identify different areas. So we start talking about antibiotics, they start talking about jobs, they start talking about different things. And we identify issues that they were talking about. And then we ask them to choose one of these issues. What is the most important thing that needs to be solved for the industry to be sustainable? Okay, so they get together and say, this is what I think. And then we went to the Bayesian belief network. So here we said, okay, you have a main problem. This problem can be solved or cannot be solved. And then we ask them, what are the 3 most important things that need to happen, that need to be changes for this problem to be solved? Okay? And then we ask, okay, for every one of these, what are the 3 most important things that need to be changes to this to happen? Okay, so we create kind of a network. And then we ask for what we call the conditional probabilities, perceptions. So for this to happen, okay, if this happened, and this happened, the most positive possible scenario, if all of that you say that need to happen actually happens, how probably do you think that the problem is solved? Okay? So we mix all these scenarios and ask them about the probability of solving this problem. And we did the same here, here, and here. So we create kind of conditional probabilities for all possible scenarios. And we were able then to compute using Bayes' rule what are the expected, posteriors of those beliefs. So basically, the 3 determinant, 1 scenario, 2 scenario A and B, A and B, A and B, many different scenarios, and we ask for the probability. So what people think is, well, if this problem is solved, this is going to be sustainable, for example. But if this problem is solved, nothing is going to change. Okay? So they can provide us a measure of how probable they think the industry will be sustainable. And we understand that measure as the perception of sustainability by this group of people. So we create this network, and we are able to compute this probability. So we went to 7 places. We talked to people there. We talked to government and NGOs in Santiago. We talked to scientists in Concepcion, artisanal fishermen, workers, private companies working in the aquaculture sector. We talked to artisanal fishermen and to the local community, a big group of people from the community in Magallanes, in Punta Arenas. And we developed this system thinking mental maps with different drivers, so antibiotics, networks, type of nets used in the aquaculture facility, waste from production, areas used by aquaculture concession. This is only the first step, so they can start talking, okay, to develop this mental map. And then we have people in Santiago, me working there, trying to understand their beliefs. People in Puerto Montt, okay, so crazy mental maps. Artisanal fishermen trying to understand what is a probability. This guy trying to copy his beliefs. We went to Puerto Montt. We talked to workers from the industry. The most interesting thing here is how people talk and discuss about this with passion, saying that what needs to be changes and try to, develop a common view of the sustainability in the industry. We went to Puerto Montt. This guy is the representative of the industry. This guy is leading the NGOs against the industry. They were fighting all the meeting. It was really hard to, but it was very interesting to see how different they were. We thought that maybe this will create, in some sense, influence their perception, but when we tested, we actually saw that that didn't happen. People listened to them, but then at the end, they answer what they think. Okay, and we went to Punta Arenas, just a small group of artisanal fishermen. All the others were working, I guess. and the community. This, I think, was the most interesting because it was very general in terms of their view, what they were thinking, and how they discuss it. Here we had people from the government, people from the universities, people from the tourism industry, and all of that. So people was registered. This is Marcela, my student. This is Jennifer Bailey from NTNU, and that's all of us working there. John Ellis here, remember him from the first picture? He was also there. He's now a PhD student at NTNU. So we had this conceptual map from Santiago, Concepcion, Puerto Montt, different issues, different people thinking on different priorities. But what do you think? How different were they? Really, not very different. So when we asked what are the most important issues in Santiago, what came in first place was regulations and institutions. When we asked to scientists, they said exactly the same. Public institutions. It's a problem with the institutionality we have. When we asked in Puerto Montt, regulations, 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 regulations. Everybody said that the main problem was the regulatory framework, that the industry did what was that they were allowed to do by the law. So if we want to change the behavior, we need to change the law. And then they talk about job quantity, effects on originary people, competition for space, antibiotics, and a number of different issues. But the most important thing for sustainability was actually institutions, jobs, people, socioeconomic sustainability. They didn't talk much about environmental sustainability. They talk about socioeconomic sustainability. And so the two most important things were institutions. They were present in every workshop. Every workshop said this is important. And labor issues also were in almost every workshop, in 6 of the 7. And then local culture, marine ecosystem, here's environmental sustainability, conflicts, antibiotics, research, carrying capacity, artisanal fishing. So this is what they consider the most important issue, institutions, governance. This is different. Okay, and depends on the people, right? If you ask artisanal fishermen, they will obviously tell you that the most important thing is the effect on artisanal fishing. It will be weird if they don't consider that, right? So they have different views of what sustainability means, okay? But we can measure that view in an homogeneous way, in the same way, by a probability that what you consider is sustainable actually happens. You see? So then we can, even if we have different views of what sustainability means, we can measure with the same metrics, okay? And then we can compare. So this is what happened in Santiago. This is from Concepcion, from the scientists. I'm going to use this to explain you. Basically, they said that for governance, they defined to be sustainable governance in aquaculture sector, you need to have rules, but both formal and informal. You need to have trust among people. People need to trust each other. Very weird concept from an economist, right? How do you measure trust? Well, I asked them, I will measure trust by the probability of the trust being high, whatever you think that means. Okay? So we're going to measure what you think is sustainable by using the same metric, the probability of the good thing happen. And then if the decision-making process is adequate or inadequate. And then for this to be true, you need knowledge, you need political will, you need capacity to implement decisions. For trust to be high, you need transparency, you need inclusion in the decision-making process, you need accountability. For formal and informant's rule to be effective, you need information, you need adaptability, you need enforcement. And then we ask them, okay, what do you think is the probability of adaptability be yes? What is the probability of having adaptability? We ask each stakeholder, what is your perception of this being true? So we have 8 people here, and basically if we weight them all in the same way, we get an average probability here, okay? And then we can just build this using the conditional probability tables. We can use Bayes' rule to get all these probabilities, okay? And what was my contribution in the methodological way is, well, we can test if their answers are actually, if their answers make sense, or they just answer randomly any number, okay? How? By using the Bayes rule. So we can ask the priors, we can ask for the posteriors, and then we can compare the direct response in the posteriors with the responses by computing the posteriors using Bayes rules, okay? If you don't know anything about Bayesian, this will sound like chicken to you, right? But that's okay. Don't worry about that. That happens every time. So let me tell you what we found. So we basically compare, as I said, the priors and the conditional probabilities. We computed a posterior, and then we compared that with a question for a direct answer for the posterior. So we asked, okay, but at the end, what do you think is the probability of this being true? So we asked, what do you think is the probability for this to be sustainable? And at the end, we asked, what do you think is the probability for this main problem to be solved? Okay? I am on my time. And we compute and compare. And if it is within a range of error, we accept it. And if it's completely different, we say, no, these are not consistent. Their answers are not consistent, okay? And we take them, and we compare what if we consider only the consistent answers with and we take or if we put them all together. Okay, so this is what economists love, numbers, right? So this is the average declared belief of the industry to be sustainable. So the people in the first workshop, at the end, they think that there is a 65% probability of the industry actually be sustainable. Do you remember who these people was? Santiago, the people in the government. They think there is a high probability of the industry sustainable. It's their job, right? What the scientists think, 50% in average. Puerto Montt, the industry, the artisanal fishermen in Magallanes, and the community in general in Magallanes. So there are differences, right? There are big differences actually here between them. But if we compute using a conditional probability table, the Bayes rule, these are their answers, okay? This is what they think if we ask directly, and this is what we get if we compute it using the Bayes rule of the previous answers, okay? And you can see there are some cases, well, here, these are averages, so this looks very different, but when you go case to case, and then compare the error case to case, and then compare the average of the error, you get that there is a huge error here. So these people was pretty inconsistent with their responses, okay? But these people in average was okay, around 12%, 8%, 10%. And we asked them by tens by tens. So we didn't ask the probability, but we divide, a line between 0 and 100 by tens, and we asked, tell me one of these tens. So that's why we are using the 10% error, okay? So the thing is that when we compute only the valid cases, we can get a better measure of the beliefs that when we don't use that, okay? So we filter basically the responses. And what we found that people who is consistent, okay, that has beliefs that are consistent, their perception of sustainability is lower than when you don't consider that, and by around 5%. Okay, go from 49%, about 50%, when you take everybody, and goes to 45% when you only take those that are consistent. So basically in this paper, we identify how different groups in Chile see the sustainability problem, what's important to solve for building a sustainable industry. Usually, the most repeated issues, as you saw, are to improve regulations, institutions, labor conditions, and how to minimize the effects of our local culture. And as I just said, when we take into account only the consistent believers, that perception is lower. So, we are on time. Final conclusions. I hope I have given this message to you, but aquaculture in Chile includes both small and large-scale aquaculture. And it's not only important industry, but it's also crucial for the sustainable development of the country, okay? And we think that it offers many, many research opportunities for sustainable development of coastal communities all over the coast. We think that this agreement we are in the process of signing, in which we hope many people can cooperate, offers you and us, people at Bren and people at INCAR, a lot of opportunities to do research together, and we hope that we can take advantage of that. And I think it's our responsibility as researchers, as students, to find new methods, to find new answers for future development of sustainable aquaculture industry, not only in Chile, but all over the world. So thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any questions or comments, thank you. You have the mic, right?
Yeah, so we have about 10 minutes or so for questions, and if you talk to the mic.
Hugo, thank you very much. I have a question about something I think you dedicated one sentence to in your talk, and that is the idea of using aquaculture to enhance wild populations, either for recovery or potentially for actually going out and catching the fish after you've released them. Or another thing our group has been thinking about is, could you use that to repopulate a marine reserve when you impose a marine reserve after it's been fished down, to let it recover more quickly? And so there are lots of ways you could think about aquaculture as enhancing wild fisheries. Have you thought much about that, and is that a focus of your team?
Oh, well, thank you for the question. That gave me the opportunity to go deep to things that I knew you would be asking. Basically, the thing is that we currently are not doing aquaculture in species that are wild. So currently, there is no way of using, salmon aquaculture or other things to enhance wild stocks. But the INCAR Center is actually interested, as I said, on developing this, and they are finding new ways to conduct aquaculture with wild fish, okay? And teach, once they are successful on that, they want to teach small-scale fishermen to do this. So there have been, that's an issue that we are working on. There are 2 or 3 species that have been analyzed to see if they can provide opportunities to develop wild stock recovery through aquaculture, okay? And the same thing with marine reserves. So we usually have more than marine reserve turfs. Turfs are not very productive because, they were given when the fish stock in the turfs was really, really low. And one option is actually use aquaculture of those species to repopulate the turfs. I think it's a really interesting idea. But for doing that, you first need to understand how do you aquaculture the species in the turf, which is something that goes behind, over the socioeconomic analysis, but it's more ecological analysis. And we think we need to go to that area. And I think that's a huge, great opportunity to do research together. I think.
Using aquaculture species to enhance natural populations. It's done regularly within fisheries and resource divisions within the states.
Right.
So there's a lot of information there that people might tap into, for instance, if they're interested in synthesis of data and the impacts of doing that on natural populations. I think there's a good source of data for analysis in that. And I have some experience, and I can help guide people to some of those examples.
Yeah, I think that's something really important to do in the future. I mean, for the future, for sustainability of fisheries, there is the opportunity for doing it, but we are just starting doing it. It's more focused on the ecological side, more than in the socioeconomic side. Here and there.
Sweet. So this is tangentially related to that. Has there been any work, or is your group planning on doing any work to investigate the dynamics of the growth of salmon aquaculture and the use of forage fish in those fisheries in Chile and Peru in the use of those fishes for feed to feed the industry?
Let me see if I understand the question. So we are using wild fish to create fish meal, to grow salmon.
Right, is there any?
And you want to see if there is an impact of that on the wild stock or on the
is
salmon?
your group looking at the potential interaction between the growth of aquaculture in Chile and then its impact on those fisheries that are also in Chile?
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting question. The thing is that when there is always this issue, right, that you are taking fish to grow fish and less fish that with salmon than the fish that you take from jack mackerel or sardines or anchovies. And so there is always this discussion, does this really make sense from an ecological perspective? But if you look from a socioeconomic perspective, the thing is that you are creating a lot higher value fish with that jack mackerel. So you are taking the jack mackerel or the anchovies and you are inputting in a production process that add a lot of value. Because people don't want to eat jack mackerel, people want to eat salmon, right? And they are willing to pay a lot more money for doing that. So it's basically a production process that adds value to the wild fish. In that sense, we have been willing to keep the exports of the fishery sectors with about 10% of the harvest by, instead of selling the fish meal, instead of exporting the fish meal, take the fish meal that we exported, transform it in salmon, and then sell the salmon. So from the economic perspective, it makes sense. It makes actually a lot of sense. But we haven't go deeper to investigate, where the effects over the ecosystem. The fisheries were really depleted when we started the salmon industry. So you cannot say that it's because of the salmon industry that we depleted the jack mackerel fishery or something like that. But that's another, I guess, angle of the the efficient use of our resources. Okay. I think in the back, yeah.
Hi. How do your team or the Chilean government define sustainable development or sustainable salmon production development? Is it, I assume that it's not infinite, like you should have like targets or objectives on what sustainable development is. I'm just trying to figure out where is the Chile now relative to the target.
That's a nice question, especially from an economic perspective when we would like to measure things and not only say things, right? We had a new fisheries law that establishes that the goal of the law is sustainable fishing. And they say it, but they don't say what that means, okay? So it's a concept that is usually used a lot, but that not everybody understands in a good way, and not everybody can measure it. It's hard to measure because people understand different things. Some people, as I said in the paper, some people think that sustainability of the industry means that there is no effect over artisanal fishing local communities. Some people think that sustainability is all about, wild stocks. So people understand different things. So therefore, it's super hard to measure sustainability and to get a good way of how far we are. What is our goal? What is the index of sustainability? And I think that's an interesting thing that we can think about, how to develop better measures of sustainability, better definitions. And in general, we talk about balancing ecological, social, and economic goals. But how do we measure it? It's not well developed yet. I think we have one more question in the back. No? No more questions?
That's perfect. We are actually out of time too, so if people do have follow-up questions though, please come talk to Hugo just right after this, and then just give him an applause for coming and joining us.
Thank you.